this weekend, England, Wales, Twickenham, the big one. Tuolangi coming back into the starting 15, Goody, do you think?
Yes, please. Yes, please. I mean, when Manu's fit, and he's proved his fitness, I joked on here last week about I didn't necessarily think he should be parachuted back into the team because I wanted him for a Q&A. I've now replaced him for the Q&A. I've been messaging Manu. He says he's fit. Any England fan, and probably most fans around the world, if Manu Tuolangi is fit, you want to see him playing international rugby, don't you? Because there's a ridiculous point of difference to him around how he plays. England are still looking for a centre partnership. I think our best centre partnership is Henry Slade and Manu Tuolangi, and I think they proved that a little bit last year. So for me, the excitement of Marcus Smith dancing around and having Manu Tuolangi as an option, having Henry Slade as an option as another ball player as well. Manu's got to go straight back in for me. He's he can terrorise defences and create a lot of space for other players just with his presence.
It's one of them where if you're Manu, and we're speaking frankly, he ain't got much time left, has he? So what is the point in waiting for him to play another couple of games and play maybe one game at the end of the championship? World Cup's in 2 years, who knows? And everyone knows that the England-Wales game is a huge game. It's a one-off game in the middle of the tournament, how it lies now, a couple of weeks off. And you want to see the best players on the field. And the only people that are going to be annoyed about this is probably Sale. I imagine Sale aren't going to be overly happy in the fact that Manu's obviously signed for Sale. He's been injured for a large part of that. When he plays, he's the best player on the field. And we've seen that with how long he's been out. His game against Harlequins, when he came back and absolutely blitzed Esterhazen. So Sale are going to be annoyed, but look, as much as I love Al Sanderson, I love Manu and I love rugby more. And seeing him in a white shirt again with everything that he's been through, I think it needs to happen. And I think especially now that Mako and Billy Vunipola are not in the squad, they're lacking, and they've got X Factor in Marcus Smith, but they're lacking that special X Factor. And there ain't anyone better in the world, I don't think, than Manu Tuolangi. Everything you read, everyone you speak to, I've been sat down by the young lad myself. I thought he was still in a nappy. He probably was, and he sat me down. He's a one-off. He's a phenomenon, and I want to see him back playing for England because that's where he belongs on the big stage.
Who starts at scrum half? Harry Randall or Ben Youngs?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is, Jim and I are both, reasonably close to the Youngs family over the last however many years, and the story of what Tom's been through with Tiff, and obviously Ben supporting him. We spoke about this last week, I think. I think you've got to start Ben Youngs. It's his 115th cap. It breaks the record of the most capped men's international player ever in Jason Leonard. Jason Leonard's on 114. He equalled it last week, and we talked about it then, didn't we? I think with everything that he's done in an England jersey, and listen, at some point, Harry Randall or Rafi Quirk is going to overtake him. It's natural, right? There's a progression there. Ben Youngs will want to go to a World Cup, and then that'll probably be him in an England jersey. You've earned the right, with 114 appearances behind him, the 115th, to lead that team out, breaking Jason Leonard's record. You're going to get a standing ovation. I think it'll be a phenomenal thing for him on the day. And you're kind of looking at selection in a different way then. I think you've earned the right to start in your record-breaking game. He's playing well as well. Let's not forget his form's pretty good, isn't it? He's at Leicester team that's top of the league. He's had some good impacts. His kicking's great.
Goody nailed it. And without being too harsh on Harry Randall, who I think is potentially the next person to come through, you've got Alex Mitchell as well playing well at Northampton. There's no one really that close to Ben Youngs apart from, I think, Danny Kerr. I watched him play for Quins at the weekend. He's up at that level. It's bizarre that he's still not in around that. And as we said, it's a one-off game within the Six Nations. And I say that because there's a week off next week. There's a fallow week after the weekend's game. So it's all out. Put your very best team, your most experienced team out there against Wales, who are going to be chomping at the bit. Of course they are. And close to being fully loaded themselves. And Ben Youngs, Goody said it, and we spoke about it last week. Like he said, he's a class act.
Any other changes, Goody, that you'd like to see from an England perspective?
Courtney Laws, he gets in the team every week if he's fit. So I think, and going into looking at where England can dominate Wales, this is a game I'm looking at it, and people are probably thinking England should win this. We're at home. Wales are, in the doldrums a little bit, although they did put 50 on Scotland. And it's a game that probably most people, unless you're Welsh, are expecting them to win. But where we can take them apart, I think personally, is the type 5, because they have got a worldie of a backline, Wales have. So, starving that backline of any ball, the type 5 is somewhere where England need to really stamp their authority. And obviously Maro, he played at 6 against Italy. So does Maro go back into the second row? Joe Launchbury's knocking around again now in the squad. But for me, Courtney Lawes is the big one. Do you play him in the second row with Maro, or you probably put him at 6? And then you've got a real decent line-out option, because Wales's line-out is about as good as yours was for Scotland, wasn't it, Jim?
It was all right against Scotland, ironically. But I agree. I think that the pack is where, again, old school, of course it is. All starts in the forwards, doesn't it? Bore off, Jim. But I think Maro goes back into the second row. Weird that they got rid of Nick Ezekwe and he played for Sarries at the weekend. He's been released. I know they've brought Joe Launchbury in, but that makes you think they're going to go Maro and Joe Launchbury in the second row with a back row of Courtney at 6. Do they go Don Brandt at 8, Curry at 7? I mean, they've got a number of options in the back row, but I think they'll go a bigger pack as possible, and that will include Launchbury, who's played a couple of games, and obviously Maro will move back up there, in my opinion.
Do you reckon that line out somewhere that England will target then? Because I think they're saying 83% Wales have got as a completion rate, which is the worst in the competition.
Wales have always got the worst line out statistically.
Did you take them to cleaners as well, Jim?
We took him to the cleaners many a time. I'm telling you now, Alan Wynne-Jones had no respect, zero respect. I don't know why, but when he came into the line-out, he's literally throwing the ball on top of himself. I'm stood next to him. I'm like, no. I will take that off you, thank you, Alan Wynne-Jones. Took the ball off him, scrum half to 10, knock on, scrum. That was what happened every single time. So, but I mean, they were good. And this is the thing. Probably a little bit similar to the All Blacks, whose line, I remember playing against the All Blacks, right? And Richie McCaw was calling the line-outs. I was like, how disrespectful. They still put 50 on us, but we're in the line-out. I'm like, the great Richie McCaw, you are one of the best who've ever done it, but you're playing and you're up against the 2-step lob monster here, and you are calling the line-out. Don't be so disrespectful. Him and Kano, just to name 2 legends in the mixer. So, a line-out's one of them things. Wales, when their backs are against the wall, the line-out functions. When they just rock up, which they tend to do around line-out time, they're awful. And the stats, the proof's in the pudding, isn't it, with it there? They know that England have got a good line-out. The issues that they've got around their line-out is the athletes that they've got, unfortunately, and the experience that they've got in and around that. Will Rowland, Adam Beard as vice-captain, brilliant players, heavy players. Back row that they played against Scotland, quite small, really, when you look at it. You've got Jack Morgan on debut. He's not the tallest. You've got Basham, not the tallest. But they dominated Scotland with the line-out. So it's a difficult one. England are a different kettle of fish. And I suppose that the conversation will be around the back row, who they choose. If they've got Courtney and Joe Launchbury and Maro, they've got 3 unbelievable line-out forwards in there. So if Wales are going to win, without stating the obvious, their line-out's got to be on point, and their scrum. And that comes down to the question, does Marler start ahead of Genge? Because the scrum against Scotland was very good. And whether you like it or not, Andrew, Scotland have got a good scrum. So Wales, very good against Scotland. Going back and looking at that game, it's a different kettle of fish at Twickenham HQ at the weekend.
It's interesting, though. You mentioned Marler there. He obviously got released to play for Harlequins at the weekend. And they kept Bevan Rodden. Yeah, he played and he kept Bevan Rodden the squad. I think Marler comes straight back in terms of in the matchday squad. But looking at Wales, you talk about the line out, their selection in the back row is going to be crucial, I think. Obviously, there's chat around Faletau. He's back in the squad. Does he go straight back in the team at 8? If you pick in Moriarty, who we both really enjoy watching as a player, and Jim, I know you're pretty close to them as well. I'd love to see him play at 6 because he's hard and he goes around banging boys for fun, doesn't he? Their line-out options then, are they a little bit limited, Wales, with those selections? Faletau isn't necessarily a big line-out option, is he? As an 8, nor is Moriarty as a 6. So Wainwright, does he come into the picture as a 6? I think he's a really good player. And then obviously Basham, who's been banging boys for fun at 7. It's a really interesting selection. It's a headache that Wayne Pivac's going to have to sort out, because if their line-out doesn't function, they ain't winning that game whatsoever, are they?
Pod. Rugby pod.